Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Coming from a Brown Girl and our second episode. We're so excited to have you guys return and join the conversation with us. I'm Rina Kumar, and say hello to Kali.
Hi, everyone. Happy to be back.
So we are halfway into December. The holidays are ahead. For those of you who are listening to us for the first time, we are two brown moms living in North America with our kiddos. And this show is really about just how we see the world through our lenses and our perspectives and how we sort of navigate life as moms, wives, and career women. So let's get right into it. So this week was a monumental week on the Real Housewives of Miami. It was kind of sad and also heartbreaking for me, but also kind of, ooh, this is so exciting and good TV. Maybe exciting wasn't the right word. So juicy is the right word, right? So for those of you who follow the Real Housewives of Miami, there was a hot mic moment with Lisa's husband, Lenny. For those of you who don't know what a hot mic moment is, Kali, do you want to explain that?
Yeah, so hot mic moment is when you have your mic on, and for some reason, people assume it's not recording, either because they're whispering or they feel like they've walked away from the cameras and therefore the audio is not like going to be included. So it's happened a few times. So Real Housewives of New Jersey, when Joe Giudice was talking to somebody on the phone and swore at Teresa. It's happened with Real Housewives of Salt Lake City when Meredith? No, when
Lisa.
Lisa went off on Meredith. So it's happened a few times, but this one is hands down the most, I personally think, monstrous hot mic moment.
Yeah, it also happens a lot with politicians. I know Trudeau was in a little bit of trouble. Was it Trudeau that was in a little bit of trouble a couple of weeks ago?
Why?
For a hot
What did
mic
he
moment. I'm not sure exactly, but
Oh,
a
I
hot
didn't know
mic moment, yeah, with another politician
that.
international.
Well, I'm gonna just start it off with a bang. I'm gonna be very honest with you. And I do think this about the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City as well. I personally don't think Lisa's husband thought he wasn't being recorded. I in my life have thought many a times like certain people when they're cheating almost want to be caught and they don't want to just be mature and respectful and have a direct conversation, that they do things just to get caught. It's kind of like, when people tell you stories where they found like their partner cheating in their bed and like it was the time they're supposed to come home and you're like, well, what did you think was going to happen?
Right.
I That's how I see it. I personally think he knew it was going to happen and he wanted it to come out and he did not have the balls to do it respectfully and maturely and directly with Lisa.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion.
So just to set the stage for those of you who aren't quite caught up or who just listen to us and aren't particularly entrenched in the housewives as we are, Lisa and Lenny, who is a plastic surgeon who has made millions and millions of dollars from doing boob jobs, have been married for about, I want to say like 12 to less than 15, but definitely more than a decade. And they have two beautiful children together. She is gorgeous, also Canadian. And I
Oh,
think,
no way. I didn't
yeah,
know she was Canadian. That's
yeah,
why she's so polite.
she is, right? And she's very genuine. And I feel like, even though I don't know her, she's one of those few people on the show that really has a good heart. She doesn't like, she has her moments of like stirring up shit or whatever, but I think she comes from a good place. Definitely not the sharpest tool in the shed, but definitely very genuine and nice.
Well,
She's,
she's been quite successful, so sharp enough.
yeah, that's true. So Lenny, her husband, in this hot mic moment is divulging to a friend that
And
he's
he's whispering.
whispering, and the cameras have left the vicinity of where these two guys are standing. So I guess maybe that's perhaps why he assumed he wasn't being recorded. But he basically says, don't worry, in a few months, I'm going to be single as well. And the friend goes, well, are you sleeping with her? Like, what's going on? And then the shocker, he goes, no, I'm not sleeping with her because that would mean I would be cheating on the person that I really care about, referring to the mistress. Dun,
Listen, as a mom and a wife, that has got to be the most heartbreaking moment of your life.
yes.
it would literally make me like question my entire life. I think that happens, I guess, when you hit divorce anyways, but it would literally make me question my whole life because what I would be thinking is, how did I choose this person who has
Right.
decided to completely embarrass and humiliate and annihilate me on national, if not international television?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just the respect factor too, right? To have that conversation with another guy in your home and just pretend like nothing different is happening in life, you know? She's actually in the middle of a party, throwing a party for her friends, and it just seems so disrespectful. And
Right. And you know
yeah,
how I said on the previous episode, like the editors are like so shady themselves. Like as this hot mic moment's happening, they cut to her like just posing and taking pictures with her friends. Like she just, I mean, clearly she is oblivious, but it just like plays into that narrative so badly. Like I just, it breaks my heart.
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. I cut you off.
No, she does admit that there were rough patches in her marriage. So, you've been married for some time, Kali. I've been married for over a decade as well. I mean, every marriage has its ups and downs, but it was definitely very, very difficult to watch. And I've kind of seen her journey through the years. She struggled very much with infertility, and I don't know exactly how whether they had like IVF or she had a surrogate or whatever, but because Lenny wanted children, she had one and then she had another. So everything that she could do in her capacity as a wife and as a mom, she continued to keep up her side of the bargain, is how I feel. But he just kind of, you know, got his two children and then said deuces, adios, or whatever the
He tapped out. He was
yeah,
like, and I'm done. I'm tapping out.
yeah.
So
Um,
I'm going to
yeah.
as a younger person, I was like that like old soul who used to watch Oprah every single day. Like I never watched like any other crazy TV because I was obsessed with Oprah and like especially the ones where she did like serious interviews. And interesting enough, like you know how people when they talk about affairs and like cheating and then subsequently divorces, they say, you know, the biggest red flag is when somebody starts to work on themselves. And Lisa, in a subsequent Watch What Happens Live interview, says, you know, he started working out and going to the gym every day. And I just assumed he was doing that for me. But like, that's clearly one of the top red flags when your partner starts to really work on themselves and tries to make themselves look good and whatever. People say, ding, 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 pay attention. Something's not right. And funny enough, Larsa Pippen in that Watch What Happens Live interview, she says that's what triggered her to be like, something's going on here. She obviously didn't know exactly, but even Larsa Pippen was like, oh, what's happening here?
Yeah. I'm such an anti Larsa Pippen person, so anything she does or says, I don't see in a positive light, period.
Larsa Pippen says your husband's cheating, and you're like, fuck you.
Yeah, you're projecting. That's what I would say.
You jealous bitch.
Have you ever thought about like the divorce scenario in your case, Kali, or like how like
Oh, of course. Like not in the sense of like my husband and I, but like in the context of like even where Lisa is. I think as women in many aspects of our lives, we're shortchanged. Like if I like 2 kids later and like 10 years of marriage later decide to get divorced, my body's not tight. I'm not in the prime of my life. Sure, my career is better. I'm making more money, but like I just feel like in the real world, I feel like I'm a good catch. I feel like I have game. I feel like I could get like another partner, but I just feel like I'm not in as favorable of a situation as say my husband, whose career is also way better than when we started. His money is way better. Nobody cares whether his body's tight or not, and it is, but like I just feel like coming into the relationship market, he's in a much better situation, possibly could go for a younger, hotter, like person who's like gonna look at him in awe and like I don't know. I just think they're more in a much better situation as males than us females. So I feel like um, it's an easier decision, if I may say so, for a man to walk away like he did and be like, deuces, I got what I needed, and now I have like a fluffier, funnier, younger, perkier, version of you, whereas I think as women we can't do that, or it doesn't really, it's the situation of the equation's not as favorable. I don't
Yeah.
know, what do you think?
Yeah, you're actually in a better situation because I was a stay-at-home mom for a good chunk of my adulthood, and that was just a decision that I made because I thought that was what was best for my family. I've always kind of had a foot in a career, but it's always been like on a part-time basis. And I think in the
Right.
next few years, when my youngest kid goes to school full-time and like starts transitioning into like more full-time schooling, that's when I will
Mhm.
actually have like a full-fledged full-time career. So I'm actually way behind what you were. So the income disparity between my husband and me is much, much greater than what's the
Mm.
disparity between you and your husband.
Mhm. But I
So,
mean, aside from even income, like knowing you personally, dude, you're like a ridiculously smart cookie, right?
right.
But like to your point, you don't have like the resume that goes with that. So if you were to like jump back into the pond or the ocean, like I just don't think the situation's as favorable, right? As women. But I mean, not to say there isn't somebody out there for everybody, but I do feel like there's a certain like injustice or unfairness when the husbands decide to like I don't even know whether to use the word downgrade or upgrade, but when they decide to graduate to their like
2.0
second program.
version of you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And like, I mean, to be fair, like even to understand our own biases, like even you described Lisa to be super nice, maybe not the sharpest tool in the shed, but maybe it's because she's like downgraded herself or downplayed herself to be that like, supporting role for her husband. And maybe in a different situation, or she didn't choose to play, I don't want to use the term like second fiddle, but if she didn't choose to be in a supportive role, maybe she would be in a much more like stronger place for her personally.
Right, right. Me and my husband were discussing a few weeks ago, like if we were to, get divorced, to put things into context, I'm at the stage where most of my friends have been married, like let's say like 5 to 15 years roughly, right? Those who have been married, who got married very young are on the latter part of that scale. And we're also seeing a lot of the divorces and, the
Mm-hmm.
marriages are not as strong now, or there's definitely more um,
Cracks.
cracks that are more visible to the outsider, right? So we are definitely seeing a lot more relationships being challenged, and a couple of friends have gotten divorces, and some of them are in the process. And the conversation about custody came into
Mm.
our conversation. And I think the other like disservice or inequity in the custody situations is that the moms are always stuck with, not stuck with because that's not the right word, because I love my children, all moms love their children and they want to spend as much time with their children, is that the moms get stuck, not stuck with, but they're responsible for the care of the children usually between like Monday to Friday, and the dad gets the weekend. Do you see
Right,
that?
right. Which then again creates an extra burden on you
Right,
when it comes to your career.
right.
And I don't know, again, to your point, I don't know if the burden is the right word, but you bear the majority of the responsibility. Like I'm telling you, in recent years, especially since I've had my second one, one of my coworkers and I, we laugh about this all the time because both of our husbands travel for work. And we're like, bro, like I couldn't be a single mom. Like how, if like you're a single mom, do you even do pickup and drop off? And that's not even in the context of the recent COVID pandemic, the recent like daycare closures, like having a second person around, whether you're like they're your partner, they're your romantic partner, or whatever the case may be, makes your life so much easier. Like
Yeah.
I kudos to all single moms who do pick up and drop
Or
off by
single
themselves,
fathers. Let's not forget the
or
single.
single fathers.
Yep.
Fair enough. Single parents who do pick up and drop off by themselves and manage a full-time job, you are my heroes. It
Yeah.
is the most anxiety provoking and stressful situation, in addition to doing your career, to be like, shoot, I have to drop them off and get to my first meeting. Oh, shoot, I have to leave this meeting to make sure I get there. Oh, now it's snowing. Oh, now it's raining. Like, it is unbelievable. Kudos to all of you.
Right. But also like just the also with that custody arrangement usually also comes the inequity, right? Of the father or usually the one of the partners just only parenting a certain percentage of the time. I was telling my husband, like, if we are getting divorced and we have to split like custody and we're doing 50-50, dude, you're taking some of the weekdays because, as your kids get older, just managing homework and just getting lunches in and just doing the day-to-day and running back and forth from their extracurriculars and sports and Kumon or whatever else that you have your kids signed up for. Like, I am the disciplinarian, and if my kids only saw me Monday to Friday, they would hate me for the rest of their lives. Like,
Right.
that's
Because
just
you
the
basically do all
reality
the
of it.
hard part. Yeah, you
Yeah.
do all the you're basically the big meanie who has to get all the stuff done and keep everything on track. You don't get to do the fun mom stuff.
Right, right. So that
Yeah.
was definitely a conversation for us. But even though like my husband is the income earner, I do keep track of the finances. So I'm the one who pays the bills. I know how much our mortgage is. I know like how much is in our 401k, all of that stuff. But it sounds like when the disparity, like my husband is obviously not a millionaire, but when you're Lenny, like the Real Housewives
Mm-hmm.
of Miami, and your like home is worth $80 million and you have people managing the money and managing stuff, you're often given an allowance. And
Yeah.
that takes, again, another like it's another power play, because in her interview, she mentioned that like, he kind of froze all of her credit cards. Like she was just left with nothing.
So
You would,
she's entirely dependent on him
yes,
until he decides to either be forgiving, flexible, or like I don't know,
yeah.
general.
Yeah, and it's very sad to see people who have, slept in the same bed together for 14 years or 12 years or whatever they were married can't like just be respectful enough to be like, hey, I don't want you to rot on the street, or like, it
Mm.
makes me sad.
Well, I just want to say kudos to our girl because guess what I saw? I saw a tabloid, and I don't know if it's true, but I saw the picture and she's dating some like 30-year-old millionaire now. So all my conversation about earlier about like, I don't know, there's like, will we be able to be as like attractive on the market as our husbands like 15 years into the marriage? That girl is working it. I hope she marries somebody younger, hotter, and even more rich. I'm throwing those blessings into the world because I hope it happens for her. She
Yeah.
deserves.
On that note, all these husbands that I have seen leave their wives on the Housewives and then go marry the 2.0 versions, most of those relationships do not last.
Bro, they don't even last to the end of the next season
No. So,
because how you get
karma's
them is
a
how
bitch.
you lose them. How
Yeah,
you get them, how you lose them.
for sure. For sure. Now, moving on to another really sad but important thing that we want to discuss in this episode is the death of Twitch, which happened, I believe, yesterday. For those of you who don't know, Twitch was the DJ on the Ellen DeGeneres show. He's also seen a lot in other dancing competitions, and he unfortunately died due to suicide at the very young age of 40.
Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna say this story like really, really hit home within my household because over the last year, we personally have been directly affected by four losses to suicide. And I don't know, like every single time we hear a new story, I feel like we're reeling. And, the more and more I reflect and analyze, I really feel like we're doing a disservice to Black and Brown men at that young age. I don't know if it's because we have um, lots of pressures, unrealistic expectations, really unfortunate low threshold or bar for discussion about mental health. I don't know what it is, but these are all the things I'm thinking as we've seen suicide in the last year. We've seen about one every 3 months of people we directly know. And I'm not sure what the answer is, but my heart just breaks for the individual because clearly they were in a place that was so bad that they thought this was the better option. And then it breaks for everybody who's left behind.
For sure. It's really challenging. So first, when I heard the news, I was like, oh my God, please don't be a drug overdose. Oh my God, please don't be a drug overdose. Because that's where like my brain was going. And when I see a Black or a brown man who is that kind of stature die, I'm always like, oh my God, like don't fall into the stereotype of being like a drug overdose who party too hard, right? So that's where my mind went first. Then
Because of the whole celebrity thing, you think?
yeah, because of the
Yeah.
celebrity thing. And sometimes I think Black and brown men, they who are successful kind of get a bad rap, because their success is always questioned, like, did you do it the right way?
Mm,
What channel did your money come through, right? But I think like with Twitch, there was no conversations about like where his success, like everybody could see like you could draw the line from like rags to riches, right?
yeah.
There was
And
no,
he's such a clean image. Yeah.
yeah, there was no gray area for that. So I was really rooting for him, and he has this beautiful wife and gorgeous children. So it's, the first thing I was thinking is, oh my God, please don't be a drug overdose and like fall victim to the stereotypes that Black and brown men carry on like all these years. Then when it was suicide, I was almost more upset, right? Because then you're like, oh my God, like with the right help, with the right tools, could something have been done? Like I have always been in the healthcare adjacent. So I'm not a provider, but I've always been in the avenues of being healthcare adjacent. So I interact with a lot of providers. I've been in the space of like mental health and all that. And a lot of the providers say that, you know, there's usually this like very intense period, but if somehow you can get the person past that period within like 24 hours, usually like if it's a one-off situation, you can like take the person out of those suicidal thoughts.
Mm,
So I don't know how accurate that is. I mean, this is completely anecdotal, right? From just like
yeah.
my work experience, but I don't know. I was just like, you know, could maybe have like one random thing, could have a drive-through McDonald's run made the difference, you know, something just random like that. Um,
Right.
I don't know. It's
I believe that because, well, okay, so in, like I said, in my experience of this with those sort of in my circle or under my radar, I've seen people who I feel like, in my very limited knowledge and judgment, that did have mental health issues, but were in an environment or surrounded by people where those were just not normalized conversations. And therefore, I think they didn't necessarily get the help they need. And I think, to push it even further, I possibly think they were self-medicating with recreational drugs to try to, um, how do I say it? Like, make those feelings more consistent or cope with those feelings.
right.
But in the same vein, within my society, and that's why I say sometimes I question, are we doing a disservice to Black and brown men? Or like another person that's also was with on my radar actually went through the entire process, recognized that they were suicidal, and sought the treatment and did very well for a few years, but then clearly started to cycle back downwards into another spiral. And I think the scary and very heartbreaking or sad part is, did they know how much work it was going to take? Did they know how bad it was going to be? Even with the help that they would need to seek out, that they were like, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. And that's even scarier, like to be in a place, know the supports, and still think, this is so bad, I don't want to do it.
Yeah. And, you know, sometimes we just get caught up in the day-to-day stuff and we forget like the big picture things that are really, really important. But on
Yeah.
that note, particularly in our Sri Lankan community, in my community, for example, I feel like I was a child who suffered from some sort of like depression or anxiety, and it shows up even in my adulthood. I've had a lot of challenges in like career and testing when I was in college around these feelings, right? But when I didn't have the right words for it, but when I went to my parents or slightly brought up the conversation about I'm feeling down, I'm feeling like not well, because that's the only words that I really knew, my parents' reaction for the most part was not because they didn't want to address it, but they were just like, you know, fuck you. Like, we escaped a civil war. We saw people get shot. We saw little kids get raped. Like, you know, these are not problems. Like, your
Right.
feelings are not real, like, real big problems. Like,
They're
people,
not valid.
yes, they're not real valid feelings. So I think there's definitely like a cycle of that we have to overcome in like the next generation. But then on the flip side, like, you know, people will see some of my kids, and people will be like, dude, your kid is soft. Right. And so are we doing them a disservice by always listening to their feelings all the time as well?
Right. So what I will say that, like, with what you describe and sort of the Black and brown community of like you don't even know real palms, this is not valid, like, and not that they were being mean or cruel, but that was their either their limited knowledge or their limited tolerance when they're trying to work paycheck to paycheck and pay bills and just like do the best they can for us. I almost wonder if that's what pushed all of us to be functional, I don't even know if this is a term, but functional depressives or
Yeah.
functional people with anxiety. Like, I personally think that, like, I just like you've claimed, like, I've definitely had periods in my life where I'm like depressed or down or anxious or whatever. But I have become, I'm not necessarily skilled at it, but you just like teach yourself to, you talk yourself through it. You basically, like, with sheer, like, just um, force, you push yourself through it because there's no other option. I wonder if that sort of, I don't know if the word is grit, but I wonder if that sort of grit comes from our parents saying, well, you're going to have to work through it. The same as, like, when you had an infection or you had a virus or something like that, your parents are like, and you're still going to school because they know babysitting at home. You know what I mean? Like, but it's like the mental health version of that. I don't necessarily know if that's healthy, but to your point, sometimes when we cater to every single need, you're like, okay, well, are we not teaching them any resilience, any grit? It goes back to, do you remember that conversation that you and I often have, the whole, like, Courtney Kardashian, like, when her kids feel like they don't want to go to school and they need like an off day or like a whatever day. And like, you're like, oh, I would keep my kids home and watch TV. And like, my response is like, why? Like,
Yeah.
you're so going to be a 35-year-old and hopefully in a successful career. And I don't know, like, you're a doctor or an engineer or you're working at like a grocery store or something. And you're like, I don't feel like going to work. So I'm going to
Yeah.
take a day. What does that mean? The rest of your colleagues pick up your slack and you just don't have to. Like, I personally, I don't ascribe to that.
Yeah.
That sometimes makes me harsh, and I think that makes me non-understanding. And like, as you've described me, maybe not the most empathetic, but I don't know.
Yeah. But I am totally that parent. Like my kid has been home for now 4 days because he has had a fever, but like I could have totally medicated him and sent him off to school, but I was just like, no, don't bother, just stay home. So, I mean, to each their own. The one last thing I did want to talk about is, I follow a lot of makeup artists or a lot of social media pages, and there's one particular um makeup artist called Vidya, who's very popular. I don't know if you know her, Kali, but she's all over UK. She did a short stint in the US. And I believe last week she posted that, the job wasn't good for her mental health. And I guess people were sort of attacking her online. I don't know the exact scenario, but she wrote this long letter to her followers saying, hey, I'm going to take a social media break. And I was like,
Wow.
good for you, girl. You got this. Like, do you, this is important. Self-care is like number one. But then I signed in today and she has new stuff posted. And that whole
Mm,
thing is off her page, which comes then to the whole Twitch thing too. Like, is like the hustle and bustle and making money or whatever it is, or being relevant on social media so important that sometimes it overshadows like just our self-care and well-being and all of those other pieces.
wow. I didn't know all of that happened, and I'm not the most familiar with her as a makeup artist. I have like seen her in the background. But interesting enough, when we were talking about Twitch earlier, something I did want to say is, which is exactly what you're bringing up and asking about, is, I think we live in a world of social media, which number one is very addictive, which I think when you have mental health issues, addictions are kind of like, they kind of coincide with that, right? It's like kind of like a self medication or how you get your boost or how you kind of like, calm yourself. And that's number one. But number two, I also wonder, like, that social media has actually replaced our real connections with people. So before, when we used to be like, hey, do you want to go for a coffee? Or hey, can I like come over to your house? Like, we don't really do those things anymore, right?
No.
Now, what I find is we have WhatsApp conversations and group text. So, like, even remember I told you, like, one of my friends had committed suicide, and the person's like, well, we talk in the WhatsApp group every day. I'm like, talking in a group WhatsApp cannot meaningfully replace like you going over and shooting the shit with the person or having a coffee with the person. Not to say that those conversations can't be meaningful, but I don't think it's a complete replacement of human connection, being present physically together, like checking in on somebody to see what their real life is like, especially when we put out such a different, I want to say facade, but such a different view of our lives as is what we're presenting on social media of what's versus what's really happening. I don't know. I don't think it's making mental health better. I sometimes feel like it almost masks it. Like when you see somebody like Twitch, where all I see is happy dancing videos with him and his wife and his gorgeous children. And then here we are, right? Like, how can you not help but ask yourself, what did we miss? Or as a wife, like, how can you help? And I know theoretically in my mind, that's not how mental health works, but how can I theoretically in my mind not ask myself, wow, was our life together so bad that this was the only escape you could think of?
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining our conversation today, guys, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.
Bye. Take care, everyone.